Hello YouTube, welcome back to a Just Talk video for a change. Today we're going to be talking about what I've just finished, Metaphore ReFantazio. And if you could do me a favor, if you like this talking stuff, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and make sure you leave a comment down below, both stating your opinion on Metaphor, if you've played it, or if you're going to play it because of what I say here. And two, if you want to see me do more of this talking head stuff, because I don't do very much of it. I find it quite difficult to talk to a camera on my own and not have something. But I might end up doing another one in the future because I'm almost finished something that I'll show you guys in a second once we get there. One moment. Right, so let's talk a bit about Metaphor, shall we? So I've just finished it, so it's quite raw in my brain at the moment. I will admit this will be a spoiler. I'll do a little bit of like spoiler-free stuff, so maybe the first 5 minutes of this will be marked as spoiler-free. If it's once the spoiler-free bit has ended, I'll put a little chapter in the bottom for the spoiler-free bit and then the spoiler bit. So for spoiler-free bits, Metaphor is maybe the best Atlas game I've ever played. And while that isn't necessarily an amazing thing to say, I've only played 5 Atlas games. I've played 2 of the Persona games, this game, and a couple other games that I think they've either published or maybe they might have developed and then, they were one-off games. Metaphor very well might be my favorite Atlas game that has ever existed. And I really hope that people who watch this video understand that when I mean that, I mean it. This game is a 10 out of 10. It has such an outstanding story. The combat's innovative. They build on what they have in a baseline in Persona. They give the characters really interesting, really fun, really sad at times backstories, and it's just something that I think is 100% worth playing. The art style and the direction. If you're unfortunately unable to watch things that are very high contrast and very not necessarily super bright, but have a lot of contrast and heavy shading, it might be a bit difficult because of the styling of the art. But if you can get over that, and or maybe you're okay with that, and that's not a problem for you, it's not a problem for my eyes, but if it's a problem for yours, then hey, that's fair enough. That's something you have to unfortunately live with. I would suggest this game to just about anybody. Now, I know people are going to say, well, what if I don't like JRPGs? And I'm like, well, that's fair enough, but I would say that this game is worth playing on story alone. If you don't like JRPGs, if you don't like the way that Atlas does their combat, how Atlas does their stuff like that, you can just always turn the story down to you can turn the difficulty down to story, and you can just breeze through the combat, and there's not going to be any worries about it. You can just play it without having to worry about combat. I would recommend buying this game. This game is 100% worth playing. It's 100% worth buying. It's got an incredible story. It's got great combat if you're into JRPG combat, or if you're into turn-based combat. It's got some amazing characters. I loved Stroll as a character. I loved Hulkenberg, Heisme, Basilio, Juna, Nuris, Alonso, Brigitte. All of these people were so incredibly well-rounded and so incredibly full of personality that I think that they're worth experiencing. So yes, do that. I don't have any kind of affiliate link to tell you, hey, go buy it here, go buy it there. Buy it wherever you can buy it. If you want to buy it on PlayStation, you want to buy it on Xbox, you want to buy it on PC, buy it wherever you can buy it, because it's 100% worth buying it. And if you can get it on sale, even better, because this game is worth the full price purchase. I got 82 hours worth of content out of this game, and that feels like such an incredible achievement. The game did not crash once, there was no performance problems, and I'm not running on a super high-end rig. So, buy the game, play it. That's my sort of review. It gets a 10 out of 10 on my review. It is a recommended must-buy if you're a lover of video games. Now, that's the end of the spoiler-free discussion, so let's move on to the spoiler discussion. And it feels very much like a game for adults with themes and stories. Absolutely. Absolutely. This is an adult story told by adults to adults. In the visage of adults too, right? Because even though the character we play is not super old, they're not 19, they're 19 or 18, I think. They're 19 in the last scenes we see them in, because it's a year after they get coronated as king. So that means that they start off at 18, which means that they're not old by any stretch of the imagination, but they are also an adult. So they've probably seen some of the world, they've done this sort of stuff, and you know, the fact that every other character around you is probably older than you, but not necessarily by a lot. In some cases, Grius is a decent bit older than you. Barden is probably like a middle-aged dude. Hulkenberg might be a decade or so older than you. Stroll might only be a couple years older than you. He might be like 5 or 6 years older than you. Heismay is for sure in his mid-30s because he's a dad, had a kid. Nuris is older than you. Like, everyone basically is older than you that you interact with when it comes to your followers. And I think, personally, for my own side of things, I think that's why this game is so much better to me than the Persona games. I know I'm going to expound on that because I'm sure someone's typing vehemently in the comments about that. And the reason why I think that is because Persona is trapped in this universe that it's in that Persona is like high school kids, like people who are between the ages of 16 and 18, in a realistically stylized world wherein you can't have certain things happen, right? You can't have people who you follow around in that universe. You can't really have a kid die, right? Like, you can't have a 16-year-old be killed, because that feels like Persona does super hardcore, super dark storytelling at times, right? Like, Persona 5 has some very, very dark moments in it, but none of them are as like hardcore as someone being like, yeah, my son was killed and I couldn't save them. Or like the fact that Alonso lets himself be killed so he can like push you forward to be a better king and all this sort of stuff. That would never happen in Persona, because Persona has to be grounded in this high school kids reality kind of thing, right? Like, Persona, as much as it is a fantastical experience of being in that universe and being someone who can use a persona, you are still trapped in this world of, they go to a fantastical other world, but then they return to the real world, right? So like, when you're in the real world, you are just a 17-year-old kid. When you're in the fantastical world, you are an almighty god killer. You know, there's a big difference there. But in this case, you can sort of combine those two worlds and make the reality that you are an all-powerful god killer in the case of Metaphor. And you can tell these stories that are so much more in-depth and so much more adult and have so much more real-world theming to it. While obviously in Persona, you are in the real world. But there are certain things that I can't really approach because it would make the game basically unsellable. You wouldn't be able to sell the Persona games in probably Japan, Australia, certain other places like that if you had much more adult theming to it. I think it would become a lot harder to sell that game in certain regions if there was even more adultness to it. But like, my only real... Well, there's also the negative in the writing, right? Because Persona has that, you know, Japanese culture, stereotypical writing, wherein like there's always like I've seen some of the like lines that have been taken out of Metaphor, and I'm very glad that they were taken out. Wherein Stroll is like, he struggles to talk to women, and it's very weird for him to have that, or like he becomes infatuated with Fabienne, and like, listen, my first reaction to Fabienne was, oh god, she's hot, but at the same time, it's a bit weird for him to be like that because he never comes across as that otherwise. And then when Hulkenberg approaches him, it's the same thing. And I'm like, this feels unnecessary because you're trying to tell a story about adults in an adult world with adult themes. And if one of the main characters that you're having beside you is literally like incapable of talking to women, then you need to like check yourself. And I'm perfectly glad that they removed that, honestly. I think that's a good thing to remove. I think it allows you to continue to tell a story with mature themes and in a mature setting. And if you take that out, then how are you going to tell a mature theme story in a mature setting if one of the characters is not mature enough to talk to a woman? You know? Very glad that was taken out. And it's one of the reasons why I always say that Persona is difficult for me to approach. It's the same thing as when I played the 100 Days Last Line Academy demo, wherein like it's super anime, like super stereotypical anime, which I watch a little bit of anime, I read a little bit of manga, but there's no fucking way you could make me play that game because, oh my god, it's too much. It was so cringe. Tellman, thanks for the follow, buddy. It's appreciated. But like, that game was so cringe. Hello. I don't know what language you're speaking, buddy. I'm sorry, it's only English here. So yeah, I find it very difficult to take games that use super anime tropes seriously. What are you doing? So I just finished playing Metaphor ReFantazio. We're talking about the ending, and talking about like how I feel like it's the best game Atlas has ever released. And I'm comparing it to a game that I played on my in my demo play, my Steam Next Fest thing that I played a few days ago. I legitimately think that there is a problem with the way that like you approach anime stereotyping, because I hate it. It makes me incredibly nervous. I don't like it. And it's why I was like, okay, this game seems interesting in that it's like a turn-based action, like XCOM style survival game where you gotta survive 100 days fighting against these creatures using these students who have just been introduced to this, and your whole thing is survive the 100 days and make it to the end. That seems very cool. It's very interesting. It's got a cool like concept, but then you introduce characters who are just anime tropes, and I'm like, okay, this doesn't feel like it's being taken seriously by its own developers and writers, and that makes me not want to play it. So yeah, that's my sort of opinion on that game, and why I think that it does better than it does worse than Metaphor in my mind, because Metaphor doesn't view its storytelling through a lens that's forcing stereotypes on people. So like, if Stroll was someone who could not talk to women, I think the game wouldn't be as good. Legitimately, I think if Stroll struggled to be as noble as he attempts to be, and he was struggling to talk to Hulkenberg about things, I'd be like, oh, I cannot take you seriously, Stroll. You're literally just a comic relief character at this point, and that would really undersell his amazing storyline. Same with all the other characters. If all of the other characters had like a trope or like a stereotype associated with them, I'd be like, oh, this doesn't feel like it's taking itself seriously at all. And games have to take themselves a little bit seriously when they're trying to approach serious topics, right? Like, if you're Metaphor and you're trying to approach the topics that game is approaching, like the fact that, you know, the world is full of racism and discrimination and stepping over people and all this sort of stuff to get to the top, and you're approaching that from the lens of these characters, and all these characters actually have are all stereotyped slightly, or they all have like quirks that make them make them feel like they don't take themselves seriously enough, it takes away from the story. So I think if Metaphor had characters who were stereotypy and tropey, it wouldn't be as good, and I'm glad they removed that. The twists throughout the entire game, great, fantastic. I thought the entire time up until the point where Rella revealed herself to be the curse caster that I thought it was Zorba the entire time. I legitimately was like, oh, it's Zorba, guys. Why are we having this discussion? We know it's Zorba. He's got those what are they called? Like thorn things that we see all the time. I thought at some point he would have turned around and exposed this giant gash in his back, and Hulkenberg would have been like, you're the guy who cursed the prince and all this sort of stuff. But it wasn't him in the end. It was Rella, which was an incredible twist. The stuff where you kill Luis, like you actively kill him, like more or less 4/5 of the way through the game, and then he comes back from the dead with Zorba's help, and then at that point he kills Sanctifex Forden and announces, oh yeah, the royal magic, fuck that shit, it's not needed, we don't need to protect ourselves, fuck that. If you think that we're going to remove this factor from the game, from the royal magic, and like you then have to go out and fight candidates to like get them to leave the race, like Loveless, Milo, and Rudolph, and at that point you get yourself like a bunch more support. It's very, very interesting and very, very like prominent in storytelling that I loved it. It's so good. Who else was? What else? Other twists were there that was earlier on? The stuff in Edria / the Virgo Islands, very very good, very very cool. Love the fact that it was like, oh yeah, below this area of the world that we're in, there's the old world where humans, like, you know, humans lived, and they had this something close to a utopia, and it went to hell because of Magla and anxiety and all this sort of stuff. Very very good story, very very good. I loved it. I thought the entire time I was engrossed by it. I may have come across at certain points a bit bored, but that was probably because I was tired or because I was unwell, because I did come down with a sickness a little bit into this game, and it wasn't great. I didn't stream for like 2 weeks because I was legitimately that ill. So yeah, I would recommend it. I would have loved there to be some kind of romance subplot in this game, but obviously they didn't want to include that, and honestly I think that's probably a good thing. Even though that's my own personal preference, I thought that it would have been interesting if you could romance somebody like Yufa, given how she's obviously very into the prince / the royal highness at this point. But I do think it's cool. I do think it's good that they didn't add that in there. I think it's a good idea that they didn't do that. It's an interesting one. It's an interesting concept, and I quite enjoyed it. You know, I thought that there was some good moments in there. I thought that we ended up with a lot of characters who were very, very interesting. I thought that we ended up with a lot of characters who supported us in the end, who didn't support us at the start. For example, Batlin, he didn't really care at the start. He was like, I just want some entertainment, and then he truly grew to appreciate and respect and even believe in our own like ideals. And I think that he's a very good example of someone who starts off on the fence, and then by a certain point, usually about halfway point of the game, he supports you, and he's like, I understand where you're coming from. I see you are the person who's actually trying to make life better for everybody, and I like that about him. I like Endy. I like the fact that we have you know, people throughout who are very interesting. Whose arc did you like the most? And if different, who was your favorite character? The arc I liked the most? Ooh, that's a good question. I think, well, actually, no, I'll give you 2 different answers there because I'm going to cheat a little. The one I liked the most was probably Yufa, but the one I found the most interesting was probably Alonso, because his story arc is so different than everybody else's. And my favorite character was definitely Stroll, just because I associate myself a lot with him. You know, I find myself quite attached to him as a person. I think he and I have a lot in common, and that's probably why I like him so much. Yeah, that's. I think is that a fair answer, Red? Who was your favorite character? Who was your favorite arc? Who had your favorite arc? I assume you're going to say Heisme, because Heisme is cute, and Heisme is cute, to be fair. He's also on that list. To be fair, it's very difficult to pick a favorite because they're all so good, but it is probably Stroll because I associate as, the most with him. Sorry, I've bit myself. Yours was the brothers? That's fair. Fidelio and Basilio? That makes perfect sense. Is it because they're proper Scouse boys? Because to be fair, I also did love the fact that they had like actual people with native accents come on and do all the voice acting. Like, for example, Endy and Yufa. Obviously the islands are supposed to be like a Celtic island sort of thing, where it's like, here's Wales sort of thing out in the middle of nowhere / Ireland kind of thing, and they had the Welsh accents, which was very good. All that sort of stuff. I really enjoyed all of the voices. That's another good thing. All the voice acting in English. I didn't play it in Japanese because I thought it would be more easily approachable for my viewers to watch it in English. But legitimately, I think that all the voice acting was great. I enjoyed every single voice acting line in the game. Ow. I hate biting my face. They figured it out. They sacrificed a lot, and then they stayed themselves. Indeed, especially Basilio, because obviously, like, you know, that was like, well, to be fair, I'll give you credit on this one, Red. Any of you who have watched the episode where Basilio becomes a follower, unlocks his archetype, you guys have for sure seen that, and you've seen me absolutely bawl my fucking eyes out because of it. So it's hard to argue that that's not one of the better things, because everybody else I cried at Stroll, I cried at Hulkenberg, I cried at Heisme, Juna, Yufa, Nuris not as much because his story isn't quite as emotionally devastating as other ones, but his story still has some quite emotional points. More Brigitte, you know, all of them, they gave me some feels, but Basilio and Fidelio were for sure the ones that made me feel the most. Probably because I'm an older brother too, which for sure has a part of it, right? You know? Though in my case, it's the size is very much what you would expect. I'm taller than my brother. I'm the bigger brother. It's an older sibling thing, indeed. Yeah, like it was very much one of those things where I think that the Magnus brothers storyline, while it wasn't, I don't think my favorite, it was probably the most impactful. It for sure had the most impact on me. And I do think it's for sure the thing that's made me cry the most at video games recently. Like, even during the Mass Effect replay, I didn't cry that badly. And that's saying something. Like, Mass Effect gets me every time. So yeah, I'd recommend it. My most unexpected twist? Oh, definitely Rella being the curse caster. Didn't expect that at all. I thought it was Zorba the entire time. I thought Zorba was the one who did it the entire time. I was like, oh, there's no way that it's anyone other than Zorba, because like they showed it with those like black thorns in like the start of the game. I'm like, oh, it's him. It's him. It's 100% him. And that's why I didn't think he died after he fell off the cathedral, because I'm like, oh, it's 100% going to be him. He's going to make a reappearance at some point. So it was the fact that it wasn't him being the curse caster. That was my most unexpected twist. There's also the ones that you didn't see, Red. So there's some stuff in the second to last stream with more that are incredibly like impactful, all that sort of stuff. I loved it. Loved that sort of stuff. Loved the fact that they used the magic that gave the prince a second half to like make it more interesting across all the realms. It was a very, very good time. I thought that all the twists were good. I didn't see all of them, but I for sure enjoyed Rella being the curse caster the most. I think that was the one that was the most impactful. What was your most unexpected twist, Red? Hang on. What was my favorite archetype? Oh. Probably the prince. Though I did also love the royal thief. My favorite design-wise was for sure the royal berserker, but I really did love the royal thief and the prince. Those were probably my favorite ones, honestly. Very difficult to do better than those ones. Those were very good. The king archetype that we see at the end was very good looking too, but I really, really enjoyed. I like when it comes to the non-royal archetypes, it's probably the mage archetypes, like the elemental master, who I enjoyed the most. At least the ones that I used. I didn't use all the archetypes, obviously enough, but I really did enjoy the Elemental Master. I felt that that was probably one of the more powerful archetypes. Yeah, when it comes to the design, though, it's probably the Royal archetypes that win out there. You guessed, Strella, so you're not sure. The fight and story in the Cathedral was a lot. That was a surprise. The fact that Draco Diaz worked on Luis and then he died, like actively died, was announced dead, and then came back from the dead and killed Forden. That was a very, very interesting and very, very good twist, to be fair. So I have to give you credit on that one. That's a good pick. It's a good pick. So yes, Metaphor ReFantazio, 10 out of 10 game. Worth playing, worth buying. If you don't like JRPGs, still worth buying. Play it on story mode. You don't like turn-based combat, still buy it, play it on story mode. You think the game's too easy, play it on hard mode. I played it on normal, thought the challenge was very good. The only thing we didn't see in this playthrough was the like ultra ending, where you go to the, you know, you finish all 3 of the trials of the dragon up, and then you go into like the Dragon Temple and go into the basement, and I think you get into a fight there that like gives you a really powerful sword for the main character. That's the only thing we didn't see in this entire game, which is the reason we didn't get the complete all quests achievement. When it comes to achievements, we've unlocked 26 of the 44 achievements that are available on Steam. And if I go to global achievements, what's the rarest achievement we have? The rarest achievement we have is Teamwork Makes the Dream Work, which is use 50 different synthesis skills, which only 27% of people have unlocked. So that's pretty cool. So yes, as a last send off, I'd like to thank my moderators in the chat. As you can see, there's Red Moogle there. There's also Cody Lightbulb, who has been lurking this entire time. There is Anto, who is sometimes around. Unfortunately, he is busy, has other things he has to do. And anyone who has watched on the YouTube, anyone who has watched on Twitch, anyone who has liked, commented, subscribed, I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this adventure. We will be back next week with a different game on Mondays and Tuesdays. I don't know what game we're going to be doing yet. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to lie to you guys. I do know what game it is. It is a game that was on the first ever poll that I did for the channel. The only poll I've ever done for the channel. Probably the only poll I'll ever do for the channel. So if you guys want to take a guess at what that is, check that out, and we'll be back on Monday with it. I'll see you guys then, YouTube. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe for more of this in the future. I'll see you then.